Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, everyone. I'm glad to be the host of today's program in talk show Professor Physics class. But before that, let me introduce myself first. I'm Gafrila Syahriani Putri, as communication science student, and today I will guide you guys to this program discussing about ethics in online journalism to 60 minutes later. Before it begins, let me call Mom Rahmawati Zulfiningrum as a head of communication department for giving us a little welcoming speech and overview for this program. Mom Rahma, time is yours.
Thank you very much, Gabriela. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, everyone. The Honorable Rector of the Nuswantara University, Professor Dr. Insinyur Edi Nur Sasongko MCom, the Honorable Dean of Faculty of Computer Science, Dr. Abdul Syukur MM, the Honorable all lecturers, participants, and as well as students of the Communication Science Study Program that I'm proud of. First of all, let us thank God, Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, the Almighty, who has given His grace and guidance so that we can hold the visiting professor class with the theme of ethics in online journalism. I express my highest gratitude to Professor Vandana Patnekar Magal from the School of Communications, Grand Valley State University, USA. Thank you very much, Prof, for your willingness to share with our students. As a general principle, online journalism must respect all professional ethics and core values of journalism. As we know that at this time, we cannot be separated from online interaction. The specifics and special sensitivities of online publication and use of the internet and technology require online media and journalists to follow the norms and guidelines. Society, as interned citizens, is also expected to understand this. Prof. Vandana will discuss with us in regards with ethics, discrimination, republication, and so on in online journalism. And I believe that it will be the source of innovative ideas and concepts, and become the guidance for us in studying ethics in online journalism more deeply. Through this visiting professor class, let us extend the collaboration in various fields between the Communication Science Studies Program, the Nuswantara University, and the School of Communication, Grand Valley State University. This visiting professor class will not be well organized without the support of various parties. Especially, thank you for the Communication Science Study Program, Diponegoro University for the extraordinary collaboration, and thank you very much for TV Kusmaran. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Mom Rahma, for the greeting, for the welcoming speech, and the overview for this program. Right, before we go into the main discussion for today's program, I would like to share a little bit of information what we're going to talk in this program. So the era of journalism has changed. We start to live in print journalism to online journalism, and nowadays, not gonna lie that it feels better and it's getting better and better. But at the same time, ethics is a problem. Why I can say that ethics is a problem is because actuality can beat accuracy and verifications. So we need to control it. How to control it? Right, we will discuss this topic today, of course, with the master of digital journalism. Please welcome Prof. Vandana Patnekar Magal. Hello, Prof. Vandana. How are you today?
I'm good. This is my last day of my Fulbright specialist assignment here in Indonesia. And I'm glad to wrap up my stay at your institution and talk with students and be here. So thank you for that kind introduction. Yes, and I'm very happy to be here and share some thoughts about journalism ethics in the era of what we call, well, I wouldn't say just online journalism, but we live in a new information ecology where journalism has acquired a very different meaning because we share the space of journalism space with bloggers and citizen journalists and so many different kinds of people who write, who contribute to information in this ecology, right?
Yes, right.
And that does not bring down the idea of how do we do ethical journalism.
Yes, right. It's such an honor, and we're so happy to have you here. And before we go to the real main discussion for today's program, I would like to ask you a question. What do you think about the changes from print journalism to online journalism? Maybe you can give us a little bit spoiler for next. Yeah, please.
So the changes have been there for a while now, right? So the idea of journalism in different silos, right? As in print journalism, in radio, TV journalism, that has changed in the last 10 years or so because of what we call technological convergence, right?
Yeah, right.
Technologies have converged, and when we say print journalism, we also mean watching or reading things online. So for instance, New York Times can be read online fully. Most of the newspapers in the world have now an online presence, right? So they're there physically, but also online. So there is a shift certainly because people are reading print online,
Yeah,
right? So that's sort of the big change in our times. Where things have shifted to the internet.
Yeah, right. I really agree with you, Prof. Nana. And it's really nice actually to hear it directly from the master of digital journalism. Okay, Prof, maybe you can talk more about our topic today because me and my friends here are very excited to learn about it with you. So, Prof. Nana, time is yours.
Okay, thank you. And I'm really honored to have this title you give me, that Master of Digital Journalism. I'm no master, but I teach journalism and teach digital media, but also its relationship to society, right? And that's, but I'm very happy to share some thoughts on this. So let's see. What I want to say at the outset is we are going to talk about sort of what are the new ethics of online journalism. Should there be a code of ethics for online journalism? Well, of course there should be, because journalism is a profession, right? Journalism is for profession. In the sense, the idea of professional journalism is this: that you have studied what journalism is. You know how to do certain kind of stories. We do non-fiction stories, whether it's urgent news or long-form stories, or we do journalism on television or radio. But there is a certain way we write stories, right? It's very different from writing other forms of literature. Here we are fact-based, verifiable information is what we gather, and we write stories so that some complex issues can be brought to the audience and made it simplified, not simplified as much, but understandable, right? How do we understand some of the complex things that are happening in the world? That's what our job is as journalists, right? Now, whether we do it online or we do it in certain particular media, the traditional media such as TV and radio and print, right? But right now, as I said, everything is converged on the internet, which means much of everything is online, whether it's video, whether it's print, whether it's multimedia, so to speak, right? Photographs that can be organized in a multimedia way, and so on. So in terms of talking about online journalism, so what I've done is, for today, I have drawn some ideas from the European Council, from SPJ Code of Ethics, which is the US's journalism code of ethics. And I'm sure Indonesia has their own code of ethics. Indonesian journalists have their own code of ethics, except I couldn't find them anywhere in a short notice, but I'm sure you are familiar with them, and your professors have brought this to your notice, that we operate as journalists, we operate, or future journalists, or wannabe journalists, we operate with a certain code of ethics, right? Okay, so and that can be fairly easily transferred to online journalism. Yet, the online medium is a little different from our traditional media. So this is what we'll talk about. What are the sort of new issues that online journalism has to deal with? But let's begin with basic ideas in journalism, right? So the basic idea is in journalism, what we are taught, and I'm sure you're taught this, that you have to have your information that is accurate, right? You confirm that this is the correct information before you put it in the story. It is fact-based, right? In the sense, this is a fact, and you verify those facts. And there are ways of verifying, right? We won't get into how to verify facts, but I'm sure you have learned some methods of verifying the facts that you are going to include in your story, right? Also, we think about publishing whatever we are writing without intent to do harms to others, right? We don't, something that is what we call, we stay away from what is more popularly known as hate speech, right? Something that harms other people's reputation or other people's dignity, and so on. So we stay away from that. And also we try to be inclusive of different points of view, so that every reality has a different angle, right? So we take other angles other perspectives into the view. So inclusive of all relevant points, and then being transparent in the origin of the content. We must attribute the source, right? We must tell our readers where this is coming from, where this information is coming from, right? You agree with that? Yeah? That's why we cite sources, in the sense we say, so-and-so says this, or this particular book says that. So, as college students, you're used to citing sources, right?
That's right?
And it's very important in journalism.
Very important. Yeah. I agree with that.
Right. Otherwise, if you don't cite your source, then you are susceptible to infringement of intellectual property rights, right? Also, because somebody will say, you know what? It's also called plagiarism, right? You just take other people's writing or information or images, and then you might be sued. In the United States, you can be sued for infringement of intellectual property, right? So those are some of the key issues in journalism, in any kind of traditional journalism, in the traditional media, so to speak, but also in the new form of journalism and the new forms of writing, whether you're writing a blog, whether you're writing any kind of content creation, right? Whether you're creating images, you want to make sure that those images are yours. You have created them. Or if you take some other or images sourced from other areas, then you want to cite the source. You want to tell people where this is coming from, right? So these are some of the very basic things, right? Okay, and then the idea of respecting other people's dignity, right? So in terms of their reputation, their privacy, right? So if you go to a restaurant, right, and you see at least a local celebrity having dinner, you can't just go take a picture and then publish it. That's not right, right? Is that principle that we follow, people's privacy, people's reputation, or say somebody some celebrity or a well-known person in the community, somehow gets into some kind of an argument with someone. You can't record that and say, you know what, I just recorded this and this is the story. You can't do that because you are infringing on their privacy rights, right? So these are some of the things that you want to think about. And then basically you're thinking about always when you create content, you're thinking about how this might possibly, potentially harm someone. That's very, very important. So consider what you're including in your writing and if it's going to harm somebody, right? Harm someone's reputation, someone's privacy rights, and so on. So basically, no hate speech in your writing.
No hate speech. It's
right?
really important.
Yes, yes. And so the idea here, so I'm talking to all of your students with the assumption that at some point you will be creating content, either for newspaper or for television or for radio or for writing a blog or in the internet. You might be creating that. But you might also be curating content, in the sense taking other people's work and curating it in order to maybe have your own newspaper, online newspaper, or online website, right? So that's what we call curating. Previously it was called editing, but now curating, because it's already published and you're taking it and including it in your site or your publication, but you want to attribute it too, right? So that's kind of what we call curating, right? The other idea is be aware of discrimination, and this is again same thing in all media content, right? We want to be aware of discrimination on the basis of gender, age, physical or mental disabilities, or someone's sexual orientation, or religion, or ethnic or social status. You don't want to discriminate people, right? In the way you write about them, or you pitch them against some other group. You want to have some social equality, some social justice, so to speak, right? The other important thing is if you are writing of any kind of, if you're contributing to any kind of forum dedicated to children or young adults, these kinds of forums should be monitored for for preventing cyberbullying, because that's a very ongoing issue among younger people, right? And that's, I mean, even the big sites such as, you know, Instagram, and they have come under fire for not caring enough about these ideas of discrimination and cyberbullying, etc. So I don't know, you're probably aware of this, that places like Facebook and Instagram, they've been pulled into court for various kinds of things that they haven't taken care of, right? One of them is the idea of how the use of their sites affects teenagers, right? There's been stories about teenager suicides because of certain kinds of content that they see on the internet. So this is a huge, ethics is a huge area. Today we are talking about a few points that we at least the basic points that we must be aware of. The other thing is also, say if you're curating a site, you are sort of managing a website, right? You are editing a site. You want to make sure that there is a clear distinction between what is the editorial content and what is the user-generated content, in the sense people are allowed to comment, people are allowed to post videos on that site, right? And that's okay, because we live in an interactive media, right? Media today are interactive. They want content from the viewers, whether it's just in the form of comments or even so people put some people provide editorial content. So for instance, there's a hurricane going on. People post videos on CNN site because they have taken the video, and CNN accepts this because these are almost like the stringers, you know, stringers, like people in the community who report on issues that are important, right? Many of the sort of major television stations and of course newspapers, they take content from, they ask for content, that kind of content. But that's different from comments, right? And you want to separate those. It's a spatial separation in your site, but also sort of basic idea of how those are very different. The content is very different from people's comments. People can say things in their comments, but in curating it, in editing it, you want to be aware of same principles. Remember, discrimination, harming other people, so you should not allow people to say anything you want, right? That's very, very important today, because you know we also live in an era of what? Disinformation. And misinformation. And well, I don't like the word fake news because it's been appropriated either way, right? The idea of fake news, everybody is using it for good or for bad. But there is this real misinformation and disinformation. Yeah, misinformation is something that happens by mistake. Somebody is really, made a mistake in gathering facts, and that can be rectified by the next time you add a comment saying this was mistakenly said this. But disinformation is deliberate, right? Which is people want to skew the information. People want to give false information in order to, for some kind of a political gain or economic gain, whatever, right? So these things you have to be aware of, the definitions of what these are and how they seep into our what you call information ecology and becomes part of it. And then people begin to believe information that is not accurate, that is not correct. Yeah. In most of the newspapers, of course, or and online newspapers, editors are legally liable for content generated by third parties, right? Again, as we say, the internet is, all content in internet is interactive in some ways, right? People can put in information, but also remember there are links, right? There are hyperlinks, there are links, and at the end of the hyperlink, so supposing they're reading your story and you put in a hyperlink in there, you want to make sure that hyperlink is accurate and that it's not some kind of, again, disinformation somewhere, right? So those are some of the things that are becoming more prevalent, or more issues that you want to think about in this new kind of media, which is the what we call, generally we call internet.
Internet, right?
With me so far, I can talk about a few more things. Okay, again, now user-generated content related, right? So when you are taking, or when you are putting in information, which is user-generated, means users of that media are putting in the content, right? So in that, there are some issues, like hate speech, as we talked about. So what is it? It is understood as something that is intended to generate intense hatred, or incitement, or violence, or discrimination against individuals or groups, especially minorities of all kinds. So hate speech, remember we said no to hate speech, right? Anytime you see that information is harming some group of people or even an individual, we say no, that cannot be part of this, right? And so also editors and website operators must investigate and remove unacceptable content. So if some of your readers, or you put in a story and someone comments back saying that this is unacceptable, this is not the way to talk about this issue, then the editor, it's an editor's responsibility to investigate whether it is unacceptable, and they should remove it if that's the case, right? And so in that sense, there should be a policy to take down some of the information that's there, which is harmful. So you know, sometimes photographs or videos that have serious impact on people's privacy, right? People's privacy rights and dignity of the affected person. So we want to make sure that there is a mechanism to take down that content, right? This is again maybe later on when you begin to sort of create your websites or something, or create blogs where other people put in information. Then you want to make sure you have a mechanism to take down content that's not acceptable.
Yeah, all right.
And editors can temper, you know, for the time being, disable contested content or take it down completely, right? It depends. So that's a discretion that the editors have to use. Photographs is something that's very, very important, right? How you take the photograph, whose photograph you're taking. I mean, there are all kinds of stories about people just, you know, even photojournalists, established photojournalists, taking a picture of someone and just using it in their content. So you're in a marketplace, for instance, and you just take a picture of this marketplace area, right, or a bazaar, right, to show it's part of your story. So you put that in, and then there's some person there who I don't know, maybe smoking pot or doing something that doesn't show them in good light, right? And you use that photograph in your website. Is that good?
It's bad.
It's not good, right? So you want to be very careful as to what photographs are, how you're using photographs. The other thing is, this has happened actually in real life. I remember an incident where a photograph is taken from somebody's social media website. Social media website, you know, people put all kinds of information about them, right? And so, media, particular media, what you call newspaper, has taken a photograph from there and put it in a story because they couldn't reach that person for the story and so on. And I'll tell you a story, a real quick story about there's this friend of ours who is he's a reporter. He's not on staff, but he writes quite a bit. So he wrote a story about one of the person who got elected in the Legislative Assembly, and it was a particular ethnic group, and so he contacted someone in the community of that ethnic group and said, can you talk about this? This person got elected, is from your ethnic group, can you talk about it? And the person gave a short interview. Well, the next time he wanted to include a photograph of that person. Couldn't find that person, so what he did was he went to their social media and took that photograph and put it in that story. And of course, that was not good, right?
That was terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
So these things happen, and you want to be very careful about that. Was there a clue you're giving me, or no? Okay, thank you.
You can next.
Okay.
Continue your.
Okay. So the idea of also images, because we have this facility that images are available through people's social media, don't just take them. Always ask permission when you're using a photograph, right? That's the idea. Okay. Republication of some content that's already there, you're pulling it into your website. Now, I remember there's this whole discourse about how Google uses somebody else's content and they put it in Google News, so to speak. They're not creating that content, right? So now I think they're very careful. They also attribute where the story is coming from and so on. But initially, there were a lot of websites that were doing that, right? News websites.
Right. News websites.
They were just taking stories, you know, from other people, other publications. And remember, those publications had journalists that are paid to do the story. And they are putting in that effort, right? They are devoting resources to create that story. And now you're simply taking that story and you're making money off of it because you get advertisements on your website. That is not good, right? So those are some of the issues that are very much kind of what you call in the discussion about ethics in online journalism. So when we call online journalism, as you know, I'm sure you understand this, there's a thin line between what is really online and what is, what is just in the traditional media as we know, right? So these are some of the sort of lots of the, these are what you call issues that are fairly important at the outset. And as you study journalism, as you advance in your study of journalism, I think you will realize that there is lots to learn about how we use content, how we write about things, why we should be accurate, and why things should be verifiable by other people. Otherwise, in countries like United States, you can be sued for the smallest thing, right? For the smallest infraction. It might be just out of not knowing something, but so you want to be very aware of what a journalist's rights are and how to transfer them into online journalism. Okay. So I think I'll stop here in terms of just my general discussion, but I'm sure we have questions.
Okay.
If you do have questions, I'm happy to answer.
Yeah, right. Thank you for your time, Prof. Andana. That was really interesting topic, and it apparently it also happening in Indonesia too. And I do also agree with all of your presentation because it was really, it's really relatable to our major in here in communication science because we also learn about digital journalism and we also learn about digital communication ethics and ethics needs communication, but communication needs ethics too, right? Okay, now it's time to open the Q&A session. Maybe some of my friends here want to ask some question. So please want to ask question. Prof. Andana will directly answer the question for it. Yes, please.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the opportunity. It's a pleasure to be here, Ms. Vandana. I'm Denisa Aulia, student communication of science. I'm really interested in these kind of topics of journalism, online journalism. So here I have some issue that I want to discuss. So clickbait is a common thing nowadays. We do know that this violates the ethics of journalism. However, this is the reality, and there's an industry behind it, and we can't do anything about it. And my question is, do you think in the future, is there anything related to the algorithm of the internet that might change this phenomenon related to the media industry and the topic of ethical journalism? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a really good question. The clickbait is very much discussed. I think everybody knows what that is, right? So these days, the popular stories, we click on that story, and that generates the idea that more people are looking at the story. Because, okay, so let me go back a little bit. Previously, all in the traditional mode of say newspapers or television or radio, we talk about the Nielsen ratings, right? In the sense that how we gauge how many audiences are, what's the number of people who are watching or reading this news. And depending on that, that newspaper can claim advertising dollars. Say, we have like 80,000 people watch our news, right?
Yeah.
And so our advertising dollar should be, rate is a little higher than other newspapers who have only 20,000 readership, right? Fair enough, because you're reaching a larger audience. But now today what's happening is in the online world, the stories or publications claim this number with how many people click on that story, right? So sometimes the keywords are put, the algorithm puts the keywords in such a way that it seems like there's not a very good story, but the keywords are attractive. And so the keywords are attractive, and so they just click on it, right? And that's a real issue in terms of what that is. And the idea of okay, so what happens with the clickbait also? The good stories don't get as much exposure as much as the stories that seem more popular, right? And so even in the journalistic circles, they say, well, his story, this person's stories are always get more clicks, and that's how they find the journalists what you call credibility or worth, right? That his stories are good because more people are reading it. That may actually not be true. Does that make sense? So this is one of the issues with clickbait. And I don't know what the solution is for that, because this happens in the world of online journalism, right? And it's something that that is being scrutinized, that people are really aware of, and being watched as to what if there can be a solution to this idea of clickbaits. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for the answer, Prof. Nana. Maybe before we start to continue to the second question, I want to ask you a question about what do you think about the SPG Code of Ethics? Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that.
Right. So I don't know if we can pull it up. So there is in the United States, there is a Society of Professional Journalists, right? They have a code of ethics, and they publish that as it's very much available anywhere. So as a journalism student, you should really read it, and it's like a list of what the do's and don't do's in journalism in terms of ethics. And so you should really be very aware of that. Make it your big mantra as to, okay, am I adhering to this code of ethics or not? And so in terms of thinking about this presentation, I was also looking at whether there's any Indonesia-specific code of ethics, because this SPJ code of ethics is drawn by journalists in the United States, right? Yeah. But also now internationally adopted in some ways, because journalism has become a global thing, right? Anything that's published online can be accessed from anywhere in the world, right? You folks can read the New York Times very easily, or any of the magazines in the United States very easily, or not just United States, but from India, from other places in the world, right? You have access to it. So there is kind of a global idea of this journalist code. And remember, we have a code because we are professionals, right? Journalism is a profession. And every profession has its code of ethics, just like medical profession has, the legal profession has. So journalists are also professionals, and they have that code of ethics. So I have shared that with your professors, hopefully, and you can access it. Just go look at the SPJ code of ethics on the net, and you'll find it.
Yeah, I really agree with that. So we really need code for professional, right?
Correct.
Yeah. And okay, we go to the third question. Maybe my friends here want to ask some question. Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. My name is Irene. I'm from Communication Science. So I have a question that maybe I want to ask. In nowadays era, I mean in this pandemic era, maybe especially in Indonesia, many people wants to go viral, or maybe we can call citizen journalists, so they can spread the news quickly and without limits, and in the form of the content. Now my question is, how do we as recipients can distinguish which news is true or accurate and news that's hoax? Thank you.
Okay, so you're saying that how do we think about accuracy when everybody wants to put content? Is that kind of the overall gist of the question, right? How do we know it's accurate? How do you know it's verifiable, right? That's a very good question. So I think this is why we emphasize that journalists emphasize that, okay, we have gone through coursework in journalism where we have learned how to, what is. Journalism is not about just writing. Journalism is about news values. Journalism is about curiosity about the world, but also how to gather facts, right? How to gather facts, how to attribute. There's so much we learn as journalists. Whereas people, because they have access to writing, people can write and then is it verifiable? No. Is it accurate? Perhaps not. So that's one of the big issues in this, what I call the information ecology, right? But here's the thing, as readers, we need to see if the claims that are made in the writing, do they have any evidence to support that claim, right? Do they have any clear evidence? So the reader also has a responsibility in terms of how they understand this information. Does that make sense?
Okay, right. Thank you, Prof. Nana, for the question, for the answer. Okay, maybe because we're not having a lot of time, unfortunately, we will have one more change for you guys who want to ask a question. Okay, please.
Okay. Thank you for this chance. Good morning, Ms. Prof. Pandana. I'm from Communication Science student, and I want to asking about this. According to the one first website, there are 47,000 online media in Indonesia on 2022, and only 2,700 that verified by the one person. So it's assumed that only 50% from the above that registered as a parts company and wrote the code ethic journalism. How do you think about this problem? Which one is more important? Government strengthens their regulation or make the audience aware with the media literation? Thank you.
Right. So I see the importance of your question, which is how do you deal with this idea of false information or really not verifiable information, because it's like a sea, right? It's like a sea of information. What is correct, what is not, it's hard. That's why there is all those strategies are important. The idea of media literacy, right, among people, among readers. What is media literacy? I'm sure you have some kind of a course which is about media literacy as to how do we navigate in the sea of information and find factual, verifiable information. If you're just in the online, if you're swimming in this online media, right? So I would say you should not read online, but you should also read some traditional, when I say online, there is some really good sites on online also. Like there is a site called propublica.com. I'm not advertising for it, but it's a non-profit.
Yes.
But they do really good investigative journalism. Now that is online journalism, but that is really good journalism, right? So at some point you have to sort of, just like when you're watching a movie, there are so many movies available, right? You read reviews or you find out from your friends as to, oh, this is a really good movie. You have to ask, why is it a good movie? And then they'll give you some ideas about it, right? So it's the same thing with information, I think, these days. You just have to navigate that through with the assistance of, of falling back on what we call good journalism, right? The more well-known traditional journalism. So read your general stories, the blogs and so on, but also read what is we traditionally know as good journalism, right? And there is a lot of that, and that is online too. So that's one way. I don't know if regulation itself will do, and regulation is a huge, again, concept. We don't know what kinds of things, but I think all governments are thinking about regulation about this content. So it's a many-pronged strategy to really be well-informed. Yeah.
Thank you. All right, thank you, Prof. Andana, for the last answer. And I do also want to thank for all my friends here who already participate to ask some questions to Prof. Andana. But sadly, our time is up, so we have to close the Q&A session. And once again, I want to thank you for Prof. Andana. It's such an honor to have you in here, and it's such an honor that you want to share your knowledge to us. It's really, really useful for us, especially we in communication science students. And hopefully next time we can meet in another more interesting discussions, of course with a longer time. And yeah, thank you for your time, Prof. Andana.
Thank you, Gabriela. And it's my pleasure to be here.
Yeah.
And I'm very, very pleased to be here on my last day of this trip to Indonesia.
Oh, okay.
It's lovely to meet, at least briefly, everyone. And thank you for your kind comments about introducing me and so on. So thank you.
Yeah, right. I do also thank you for you. All right, especially about if I back a little bit about the topics, about the accuracy, and no hate comments or hate speech, and the fact that have to be accurate, because this ethics in online journalism is very important to us. Especially, I want to say it again, in communication science, that fact accuracy is very important to us. So I'm Gavrila, and I'm sorry I have to say goodbye and see you next time. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Pemerintah Kabupaten Batang, Jawa Tengah mengupayakan sejumlah program untuk mengendalikan inflasi, salah satunya melalui sektor pertanian dengan gerakan Tanam Pangan Cepat Panen. Pemkab Batang meminta seluruh masyarakat untuk memanfaatkan lahan yang ada, baik lahan luas maupun sempit, untuk ditanam